So Fernanda, as you know, you have 15 minutes to present. After your presentation, you'll have a seat and the commission will ask you questions. You may start now.
Okay, so good afternoon. The name of my research study is the use of L2 in the EFL class and its effect on primary students' motivation. So to begin with my presentation, the context of my study was in Universidad Santo Tomás Santiago. It is a semi-private school. I observed a 4th grade of primary education class. The students were 29 and they were from between 9 and 10 years old. My research question was, how can the use of L2 in the EFL class affect the motivation of primary education students? The objectives was to understand how the use of L2 in the EFL class can affect the students' motivation based on identifying the students' reactions on the use of L2 and by identifying the students' feelings and motivations for learning in the English class. Well, first I decided to divide my study into 2 different categories. The first one was the use of L2, and also the other one was motivation. And those 2 categories, I divided them into 3 subcategories each. That was in the use of L2. One of the subcategories was the amount of L2 used by the teacher in the class. Another one was the student-student interaction using L2 and the learning of new lexicon. And in motivation, the subcategories were the participation of the students in the classroom, the importance that they give to the English class, and the performance that they have during the English class. Okay, so the instruments that I selected to collect the data were field notes and a group interview. Why field notes? Why group interview? Well, field notes because I needed to observe the reactions that the students had. The best thing that I could use was this in order to observe the reactions in action. So I observed the class for 6 weeks, but now I'm going to say that later. And why group interview? Because I also needed to focus on the students' feelings and motivation. So in a group interview, I had the possibility to ask each student how they feel about the different situations. Now, field notes. I observed the class for 6 weeks, but the thing that caught my attention the most was that the notes that I took were very similar to each other because the reactions of the students was almost the same all the time. Every time that they were faced to the use of L2, the reactions that they had was almost the same. So there is not like a big variety of notes. And the application of the interview, I selected 10 students to interview and I chose them on purpose. I chose 2 of the students that were that had the best marks in English, 2 of the students that were always participating but didn't have the best marks, 2 students that were very shy, 2 other students that say that they hate the English class. So in that way I could have different perspectives, different opinions, and different points of view. These were the questions that I used in the application of the interview, and they were all focused more on motivation, but also in the use of L2. Okay, so now the data analysis. This is the chart that I created. This is the results that I got from the analysis of the field notes. And there I have the use of L2, that is one of my categories, and also motivation. And here I have the 3 subcategories of each. And basically what I did was putting an X in all the different subcategories that were related to each other. So for example, every time that the amount of the L2 used in class by the teacher was high, when the teacher uses English most of the class, the participation in the classroom of the students was higher than when the teacher uses Spanish. And also, when the students had to use L2 in student-student interaction, the participation in the classroom was also higher than when they had to do a reading activity or when they had to speak Spanish. Another thing that I could observe in field notes was that the performance of the students had during the English class, when they had to use L2 in student-student interaction, was also better because they behaved better, they were more focused on the class, and they wanted to participate more. And also when they were learning new lexicon, it happened the same. They were all more focused in other kinds of activity, and they behaved better. Well, these are some of the examples of the notes that I took. I'm going to explain them, not reading. For example, one of the reactions that I could observe mostly was that when one day the teacher was speaking Spanish, giving instructions using Spanish, and the students were all very messy. The class was super messy. They were even throwing stuff from one corner to the other. They were talking to each other about other stuff. But when the teacher starts using English, the reaction was like automatic. They just remain quiet, they paid attention. It's like they hear English and they automatically want to participate in the class. Another observation that I wanted to present here was one day that I was doing the class, and they were playing a board game where they had to ask and answer questions using English. So one of the students came to me and asked me, told me Miss, I don't know how to answer this in English. And I said, well, you can answer that question using Spanish, and then you can continue using English in the other ones. And she said que fome, quiero aprender a decirlo en inglés. And that happens many other times in different activities that the students, for example, asked something, and I said oh, but just say it in Spanish, it doesn't matter. And they said, no, but I want to say it in English. Well, now the same chart, but to analyze the results of the group interview. These two were exactly the same, but I could get these two other analyses because the students said that they give importance to the English class because they listen to their teachers speak English. They like when the teacher speaks English because they feel like they are learning, or they are in a different country, something like that, they say in the interview. And because they learn new lexicon, and that they believe that they are learning in order to communicate with other people. Also, I have here some examples of the answers that they gave me in the interview. One of the questions was, me parecen interesantes las clases de inglés y por qué. And the answer was, sí, porque me enseñan a poder comunicarme con personas de otros países, y como puede que no sepa el idioma de ese país, le hablas en inglés y que probablemente ellos sí lo van a entender. That's exactly what he said. And some of the other answers were similar, like saying, yes, because I can talk with other people that speak a different language, etc. And also, another question was, siento que aprendo cosas nuevas en la clase de inglés. And they said, sí, siempre aprendo palabras nuevas, como el otro día aprendí a decir hot chocolate y después lo escuché en una película y lo entendí. I also wanted to present that because it shows that they are transferring what they learn in class to their daily context. Well, now jumping to the conclusions, I can conclude that the use of L2 during the English class as a foreign language can cause for grade primary education from Universidad Santo Tomás can cause a positive effect in the aspects of performance, participation, and the value of importance that they give to the English class. Well, some of the limitations of my study. One, I believe that is the number of students, because I could interview only 10 students. And maybe if I apply this into a bigger number of students, the results, because I will be confronted to different opinions, so maybe the results could be different. And also that this study is limited to this specific reality that was from Colegio, a semi-private school. The students were 29 and they have been going to English class since pre-K. So they had a good English, a good level of English. So maybe if I apply this study in a different context or a different reality, the results will be also different. Now, that was from my research study. Now, from metacognitive analysis, the learning objective that I create was the following. It says, at the end of the lesson, students should be able to give opinions, reflect about their reading, and connect the story with their personal experiences by discussing the reading in class and writing and drawing an alternative end for the story. So, in my imagination, the class would be about a reading. The reading is going to be about a little boy who wants to learn how to dance ballet, but his dad wants him to play football. So at the end of the story, the boy decides to play football instead because he doesn't want to disappoint his father. So that's why I want the students to create an alternative end, because I want to know their opinions and their feelings about this topic. So the key vocabulary that I will use would be adjectives such as sad, difficult, good, so they can give their opinions about it. And some grammar as model verbs, like should and shouldn't, could, so they can say what the father should have done or what the kid could have done, etc. Okay, so my strength in this class, I believe that is, to me, is easy to take like a secondary role in the class, like to give more importance to the students, to tell them that, to make them feel like they are the protagonists of the class and not me, just because I am the teacher. And I base this in the theory of cognitive development by Dan Piaget that we saw in Educación La Niñez. And he said that in the stage from 6 to 12 years old, students are starting to develop their critical thinking skills. They are starting to be more aware about social problems, and they start to be aware also about the feelings and thoughts about other people. So this activity, if I give them the possibility to be the protagonist, they could develop a better critical thinking skills and to give them the possibility to give their opinions to the class. My weakness in this activity, I base this in the Leon Marlin Center Assertive Discipline, where they say that the teacher should take charge of the situation and make sure that the learners know what you expect from them. And I think that's one of my weaknesses, because I never tell the students what are my expectations. So sometimes when they misbehave, I don't know how to react to that, because I never told them what would be the consequence of misbehaving before. So I usually tell them okay, don't do that again, because then you'll have a consequence, but when they do it again, I don't know what the consequence will be. So I think that's one of my weaknesses. And finally, the challenge that I have is that I want to learn how to help my students to develop better intrinsic motivation in the class, because, well, according to, as cited in Brown, it's important that I take into consideration the effect on learning. So I want to be aware of my students' problems of anxiety, their self-efficacy, their differences in their personalities, in order to create a better environment for my students to be more motivated in my classes. Those are the references that I use for this presentation, and that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Have a seat, please.